We are live with the Lessons Learned podcast. Today, of course, we have my friend here, Chapelmon, and myself. We're going to be talking about, is there, in fact, a better way to make video games? All the talk about crunch and problems and bugs when we're covering on the news. We're going to say that, in fact, there's some ways we can talk about that and improve the way video games are made, because as I said many times before, one of the nagging things that I have in the back of my head is that I feel like, well, I don't know, video games, there needs to be a change in how video games are made. Maybe we need a new, not Silicon Valley per se, we might need perhaps a new way of tackling the problems that we're facing. So, but before we do that, of course, we are going to do some news. And so let's see what we start with. Let's start with GOG, Good Old Games. GOG got into a little bit of hot water when they appropriated a hashtag designed to basically highlight a situation happening in the United States with trans folks, and the idea that the Trump administration is trying to erase or roll back protections and legal protections for trans folk in the U.S. And of course, they got it. People sort of shot back. And one of the companies that reacted to it was Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. They make video game related themed movies, and they said that they will pull out video game and gaming related movies from the service, and they have movies such as The Gamers, The Director's Cut, and Journey's Quest, and that they will be taking those. CEO Ben Dobbin said that they will be that they requested that their products be removed from the service. Now, these are not games; they're not a gaming company, but one of the things that companies like GOG and Steam have been doing is trying to do more than just sell video games, right? They want to be digital stores, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of a big loss we might seem to anyone in particular, but the fact that they're doing this is, it shows that not everybody's happy with the kind of language. This is not the first time that CD Projekt Red, which GOG is part of, larger company, has gotten in trouble for making what's been consumed. Hey, Anna, how you doing? Considered transphobic statements. So one could chalk it up to the
Cultural thing,
because they're Polish and all that. But
I couldn't tell you what their views on trans issues would be culturally.
Yeah, but I think they should know better, right? Consider the situation, especially when they sell so much to the United States. That's not something they should do. And they similar statements, sort of a joke that was floated around CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk 2077 also backfired in a big way. So whoever is doing social media for them should really reconsider. It's like, yeah, let's don't be so hasty with the jokes, and the apology that they've given was again felt like a non-apology. So, I mean, it's easy to make mistakes. I get it. The first mistake, it's oh boy. But this seems to be more of a pattern, and I don't know why that is, to be honest. I don't know what's going on with that, and
maybe again, it might tie into the topic at hand, which is going to be like maybe we don't want to see behind the curtain.
Yeah, but I think it's necessary for us to see behind the curtain.
It's definitely, but it's like, well, once we look behind the curtain, we see very ugly things.
Yeah, and there seems to be a pattern to it. So, I don't know. It's like, could you not be so shitty? I mean, I know, again, you can make mistakes, but still, it's a thing. It's a thing you can avoid. not that hard to avoid actually. Just fixing here the announcement. And so that's a thing. Also, CD Projekt Red is one of those companies that's been known for their crunch, which we're gonna probably talk about a lot today, both in the news and in the main, some main topic. But let's change tack for a little while. We're gonna also talk about Bethesda. Two pieces of news from Bethesda. One of them that they announced that the beta, it's going to be a live beta of Fallout 76, it's going to have some major bugs. Now, the problem with that is that already Bethesda has a reputation for making essentially broken games, and this is a public beta, right? The game is supposed to, I think, launch next month, right?
Actually, so I believe they had a beta for like 4 hours last night. It was only a 4-hour long beta or access to it. So I assume that they're probably going to have multiple betas up until the launch. And that this might be more about like stress testing the servers.
Yeah, but even then,
Yeah, you would expect all of this to get patched up, because I believe that I heard that you can preload for the Xbox One for like this weekend. You preload your all the files, all the install files and whatnot, and have it installed. But you were also kind of told, oh yeah, you're gonna want to launch this before like the time period that you can play, because there's yet another like large patch, like a 40 gig patch or something on top of this, the install files and stuff. So you're gonna want to also get that installed, so that doesn't eat up on your play time session. So it's like, wow, like that many bugs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that have been said about 76. For example, won't have any NPCs, so it's kind of like a half MMO, I want to say, half empty MMO, because it's going to be all multiplayer. It's going to be truly multiplayer. That everybody who inhabits the game is going to be a player, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I mean, they already have an MMO, which is Elder Scrolls MMO, which is still out there. They're still doing it, so. It's a thing.
So it must have its audience. But then of course we get to the letter, because so people are already very apprehensive about this game, because you're taking a traditional single player IP and making it into a multiplayer online experience.
Game as service, pure multiplayer. Like, again, no NPCs, nothing like that. People, I mean, the questions about the lore has been put up. Like, they're making some major changes about the lore to accommodate this.
Yeah, and it's brought up their views. Essentially, it's like, well, if it makes the game more fun, screw the lore, which is like,
yes. So, but one of the things, I mean, this is one of the contention things that has happened with Fallout, particularly since Bethesda has added that. One of the reasons, which I don't agree with, but one of the reasons why many people say that New Vegas is better than Fallout 3 is because they feel that New Vegas follows the lore from Fallout and Fallout 2 closer. Of course, there were a bunch of games in between Fallout 2 and Fallout 3, and in many ways, Fallout 3 kind of integrated that lore, sort of. I don't know. I mean, I'm not planning to. And then there's the fact that this is going to be basically their live servers, right? That's what they're going with, which is a lot of people, trepidations. How going to pay for it? How it's going to be the microtransactions and all that, and expansions, whatever. And on top of that, it's also going to be a service in their servers, right? Because now Bethesda, after having apparently such good relationships with Steam for a very long time, has decided that no, we're going to do everything in our own servers, right? So it's Bethesda, and they're also gonna sell Doom, the second of the revamp Doom games. It's also gonna drop in their service, which I don't want. I do not want to launch yet another client on my computer just so that one game that I want to play, especially when I already have my money in my wallet and Steam. It's easier to do that, right? I don't like Steam. I love GOG as a service. I wish that their social media was a little better than it is right now, but you know, I guess because I'm not directly affected by it, I have to admit that it's easier to swallow than someone who's like, "Oh, you're coming after me. Thank you. That's nice. Screw you," right? I can feel, I can. Somebody gets angry about that. I go like, "Yep, I can see it." So, on the other hand, and I think this might be a hint of where they're going with this.
Their letter.
No, I was talking about the patch.
Oh.
It said Massive Fallout mod New California is out today. This is probably one or two massive mods for Fallout 4.
Well, actually, this mod, the mod you linked me, New California, is a mod for Fallout New Vegas.
Oh, for New Vegas.
Yes.
Oh well, I'm not gonna play that one. That's for sure. But still, I mean, it's massive.
You'd have to. It's unreal. It almost seems like it may be a prequel or something.
Yeah, it's supposed to be between Fallout 2 and Fallout 3. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for the game New Vegas, so it uses those assets and stuff.
Yeah, but still, it
with looks pretty good.
There's also another mod that we talked about this before, which is a new Miami mod.
Miami, yes.
Maybe I think what they're gonna try to do, and this might be a strategy. I mean, because these mods are happening, and some of them have been canceled. Some remakes have been canceled, and all that. Maybe what Bethesda's trying to do is sort of let the single player experience. They leave it to the modders, right? And they can charge. They've been trying to charge for mods for a very long time, right? You can see that in Fallout 4. Let the modders take care of the single player, and they can, and they don't have to spend all the money and resources maintaining single player games, and migrate everybody to their games as service, right? With smaller games like Doom being the sort of, we're still selling single player games, 5-hour, 10-hour experience, 15-hour experience if you want them, they're there. So that might be part of a larger strategy.
Yeah, but I'm surprised. It just seems like, so from that letter too, it almost seems like, hey, bear with us. So Bethesda released this letter kind of to the fans that, this is a new experience. It's sort of uncharted territory. There's probably going to be a lot of bugs. So kind of bear with us. But they also seems kind of like, they also acknowledge the trepidation of fans and stuff. It's like, this game is going to be whatever you want. It's almost like they're trying to take that Skyrim element of those people who kind of end up doing whatever except for like the story quests and stuff, who just kind of wander around and do their own role-playing thing and try to make it like a multiplayer experience and just make it that too. Like, oh, it's you, here's the sandbox, you do whatever you want kind of thing. But also at the same time, you don't have that freedom of, well, what if I wanted a carefully crafted story that I want to follow on rails? Nope, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of guy, that's why I checked yesterday or last night, how many hours I put into Skyrim, and they're over 1,000 hours, not counting all the hours I played in the Xbox 360. But here's the thing: if you're going to make a sandbox like that, I would say make it co-op. Because the one thing, and this is just speaking for myself, especially based on my experience with what's the game, the Souls game, Dark Souls. I would not like to be just running around and then somebody drops a nuke in my head because reasons, right? I mean, some people like the PvP, but here's the thing: if you're making essentially a PvP MMO, right? Those have it, and I point at the direction of Nerdslayer and his channel, both YouTube and Twitch. He discusses a lot about this, and he actually likes a lot of PvP MMOs. But PvP MMOs, because of the nature of PvP MMOs, they tend to have essentially very small audiences, right? part of it is the griefing, right? What people
Yeah.
find, some people find fun is like, oh, I'm gonna find somebody and fight and whatever, and show them who's boss. Um, Other people like me, I'm like, nope. No, I just want to hang out and do my own thing. If I want to do my own thing, I can't do my thing. If somebody's just gonna drop a nuke on me, it's like, can we not do that? It's question mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, they're trying it, but
Yeah, I can at least applaud them, that they're trying something different, something new, at least for them. I don't think the concept of the specific genre they're doing is necessarily new. I can at least applaud them for doing that. It's just, I mean, it's like, well, I was kind of disappointed with Fallout 4, and this is definitely not reassuring me about the future of this franchise. 76. Now, that's not to say that I don't think this game's going to be successful, because I visited some friends this weekend, and I would call them kind of like, I hate the terms hardcore and casual, but I wouldn't call them. I would say they're somewhere between casual and hardcore. They don't keep up with like video game stuff, and I would kind of consider them like, oh, they're gamers in a sense, but they don't really keep up with gaming media and any of that. They just very much see, oh, hey, a new Fallout game is coming out. I like Fallout. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll buy it. And
yeah, but that's the thing. This is a game as service. You buy it, you play it, and then you start getting grief or whatever. If you don't get into the specific groove of it, it's like, just like it happened with a lot of MMOs, especially PvP MMOs. They start high because of the thing, oh, it's dynamic and other players are there and we can do things and missions, whatever. But then it's like, walk 5 steps, somebody nukes you. Walk another 5 steps, somebody nukes you. You come back from the graveyard, 5 people gang on you, right? And a lot of people are going to, I'm sure a lot of people who just remember Fallout just running around and doing the thing. It's like, I don't want this, right? Where's my safe zone? Where can I hide or where can I find my friends? Oh, my friends have left because they're also having the same experience. We can never meet.
Yeah, right? Where's my I can't make a harem of like of male NPCs in my camp.
Yeah,
just scantily clad male NPCs. I have way too much fun with that than I should have in Fallout 4, and that was even before they even were able to do new bonds on that.
Talking of which, I think this is a story that you will like, Chapelmon, a lot. It is an iOS game, but according to Kotaku, Lineage 2 Revolution adds hot anime orcs.
Oh.
Yeah, orcs.
What is this game?
Lineage 2 Revolution. It's an iOS game. It says orcs, a craggy-faced brutes of the fantasy RPG scarred by countless battles. Unlike during the Korean developed mobile MMO Lineage 2, then they're kind of hot. And I'll post this a face app here. I don't know, maybe to your liking. I'm gonna put it on the list where people can see it. Did someone say hot anime orcs? Yep, that's the link. It's a pretty long link. That's the image, the close-up. Yeah, it's available for free download iOS and Android devices. Of course, this is, you have to buy stuff and it's a bunch of microtransactions, but
yeah, what's this game?
Yeah, it's basically a Korean MMO. You just sort of are, and also other pieces of news, also from Kotaku. Battlefield 5's Battle Royale mode won't launch until 2019. It seems like companies are not necessarily... And you won't lie, Anna? Yeah. She can't deny she likes those big orb butts.
I love more than hot orc buns. Oh, believe me.
Okay. And in Battlefield, and this is this is an interesting news because I think people were saying, oh, there's going to be a rush to get Battle Royale games. And apparently, people, especially EA, has gone like, yeah, let's not rush. Let's not rush that too far because we're not really sure. I mean, Black Ops came out with a I seen this, it's very strong battle royale mode. Actually kind of fun. I seen it. In fact, what I seen about it is like, I haven't played a COD game since Modern Warfare, the original.
Yeah,
I might try this game. Well, when it has a price drop.
new Call of Duty
Black
Black
Ops.
Ops
Yeah.
4.
Yeah. It came
Yeah,
out.
I've heard I haven't really seen or followed because I don't really care much for battle royale, but I've heard good things about it. The thing is, it's like, so I used to play Call of Duty because other friends played it, and this was back in the 360 days. I think we played Call of Duty 2,
Mhm.
Modern Warfare Call of Duty 2, and yeah, I don't know how well my friends have kept up with it. It seems that like my best friend, he ever since he kind of stopped playing really gaming on the 360 and then moved to League of Legends, it seems like he kind of stopped paying attention less and less, and he kind of hangs out in his own Discord channel. I actually asked the other day, I'm like, oh yeah, because people were starting to talk about it. I'm like, oh yeah, that game came out, Call of Duty. Like I haven't really heard like that much hype for it, at least in terms of like media outlets, and I think that might just be because we have more. I think this fall and slash winter season is going to be really busy with like hot new titles. That
Mhm.
it's going to be a pretty overcrowded market. So I don't think people are going to be able to focus their attention so much on one particular game. But I actually put the question out there. I'm like, oh yeah, that game came out. Like, hey, everybody I know many people in this group who's played Call of Duty. Are you guys interested in this? Like, hey, like you guys all have interest. They're all kind of like, not really.
Hmm.
Which I'm like, it's like these used to be Call of Duty fans and they're not all that interested. And I don't, and this is probably has nothing to do with one of the other controversies with this game is there's no single player mode at all.
Mhm. Well, I think it's Black Ops, and Black Ops has a black eye. Activision
Oh,
has.
I call it something completely different.
Yeah, well,
which I will not say on the stream.
basically, Black Ops. The last time Black Ops came out, it basically the sales for Call of Duty dipped. One of the first time it actually dipped. Although Activision said, "Oh, this game is keeping on par," and I think broke Call of Duty records, but not overall records. So it's doing well, but Activision is like, well, we're not gonna say that broke the kind of records we're expecting for like World War II that broke all kinds of records. Like, oh, it's only what remember when we talk about Halo and they say, oh yeah, I broke this record and this record and this record. It's like, yeah, but those are kind of internal records. Like they're records for Halo games and Microsoft games, but not necessarily overall sales the way it used to when Halo 2 and Halo 3 came out. Right, it was like the biggest thing. So Call of Duty is doing well. I saw Frameloss play the battle royale, and he's very big on multiplayer shooters. And he seemed to like it, and he seemed to be having a lot of fun. And it was like, oh, there's something about the battle royale thing which I wanted to jump into PUBG, but by the time I really got around to it, everybody sort of drifted off, and they started making a lot of bad decisions about it. And Fortnite, for some reason, I just can't get into Fortnite because it's so cartoony, and that sort of turns me off. So I think if I do get into Battle Royale, it might be with Call of Duty, right? And it's a game that's big enough, I think, that it will last long enough. Although people might migrate to Battlefield 5 and into 2019, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. In other news, talking about buying games in 2018, there's been leaks of the dates of the winter and autumn and Halloween sales for Steam. The Halloween sale is supposed to start on October 29th and end on November the 1st. The autumn sale on November 21st and end on November 27th. And the winter sale, which is the one I'm really interested in, because in and around Christmas, is December 20th to January the 3rd. So if you want to buy stuff and you want to wait just that much longer, maybe get that Divinity Original Sin 2 that I've been looking for to buy for a long time, maybe on Rocket League, you might want to wait for those sales.
Yeah, I like PlayStation also released theirs this week for Halloween and stuff. And the thing is, like a lot of the sales so far don't look all that great right now,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the stuff that has like they have a pretty decent discount. I already own.
Yeah. I
um,
got plenty of games, and I'm looking to basically. I mean, I'm thinking of restarting Kingmaker again because I made a bunch of bad decisions, and now I'm paying for it. So I was like, maybe I should start again? Question mark. Because I wanted to, this is from the non-chipper in the room. I wanted to romance Valerie, but I couldn't.
Oops.
Eh. And I'm in a weird relationship with Octavia, who she's hot, but she doesn't have this. It's a poly situation that kind of makes me go like, maybe things might not turn out okay. I don't know. I'm nervous about it. Anna's been watching the show, and it's like, oh, it's so cute that you get so muddled about the romances. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, right. And I'm up for the gameplay. Blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
but we've talked about this before about like just Steam sales and whether they're good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like right now I'm in such a position where I'm like, oh, it's almost like I will buy a game if it's a big discount, but I kind of know that many times I will not be able to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like at least makes me feel bad that it makes me feel good that I'm not spending a lot of money for a game I'm interested in, but I may never find the time to actually ever play.
Yeah, what I usually do, my strategy is I mark a couple of games. It's like I'm not gonna buy them right now. I put them on my queue, etc., etc. And then when the sale comes around, it's like, oh, maybe let's see if it's hit the price range that I want to
Mm-hmm.
buy it. If not, then I'm not a go and buy like 20 games because it's a winter sale kind of situation, right? And like, oh, maybe I'll buy one or two, three at the most on my top list because most of them, of course, I'm also looking whether or not I'm gonna stream them. Because if I'm not gonna stream the game and it's gonna be my side game, I usually don't have the time to have a very long game that is my side game. And if it's
Yeah.
my streaming game, does it fit with my brand? Are people gonna watch it? Is it a side game that I can play on the weekends and maybe attract some audience? All those things I have to. And then also, to be honest, I don't have the money to spend like $200-300 in games I'm not gonna play. I have Elite Dangerous, so I started playing. I had to quit because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I want to play it, but we'll see what happens, right? So it's like, okay. And of course, I'm playing Kingmaker, so there's that. Always on the present, my mind is when it comes to streaming. Other news. Well, I think we can start transitioning into the main subject by talking all the things Rockstar.
Rockstar.
So let's go back to last week when Dan Houser, one of the brothers, the Houser brothers, who are the CEOs, the owners of Rockstar Games, and major holders in Take-Two Interactive, which is a parent company, he talked about how they had spent many 100-hour week making the game to make sure that the new game, the other big game that Rockstar is making, which is Red Dead Redemption 2, will be an excellent game. The typical reactions were like, dude, 100-hour weeks? Are you sure about that?
Yeah. As I said last week, I'm like, the most I put into my current job is 60 hours. And that was exhausting.
Yeah. So, and there was a lot of talk about it, not repercussions, but more like, discussions, pushback. So there was a walkback on that saying, no. The thing we're talking about 100-hour weeks, really, we're talking about a small writing team, they have this big push, but it's like, well, are the writings having a big push in the beginning of the game or at the
Yeah.
end of the game? Because you have like 10,000 or I don't know,
Yeah,
it says
because
something like
it doesn't.
500,000
Yeah,
lines.
they have 600. They I think they said they had like 700 like voice actors or something like that,
Yeah.
which is like, again, that's one of the first things. Like, so you're making your writing team like work overtime. Was this like a pre-production crunch thing? Because when did that happen? Because if you're doing that right now, like that's a bad sign. Your writing should have been done like 2 or 3 years ago, and you're just kind of on hand because you need to revise or rewrite
Hmm.
things. But
Yeah. But then it's like, no, 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 no. We're gonna have all our employees from certain parts of the company come out and say, "Oh no, working on Rockstar is great. We're gonna give them permission to say whatever we want, and no repercussions.
yeah,
Feel free."
because they were saying like, oh yeah, no, we totally don't make people work overtime, and we don't make them work ridiculous hours and crunch time. And that's like, even here, we'll prove it. We'll have our employees say like whatever they want, because I guess they have a policy where they can't talk about their work on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And asterisks, because apparently there was an asterisk there of which employees got that little ban lifted.
And the
Because
employees that usually didn't get the ban lifted were the QA employees, quality assurance. The people that make sure that the game actually works.
the
you know,
beta testers.
beta testers and all that. It's like, oh, they got so, and they apparently reached to different outlets, including Jim Sterling, who made a couple of videos about this, Kotaku and some other places. And it's like, yeah, listen, that is not exactly true. And we, of course, we talked about this before. We talked about how sincere many employees sound, and I think the consensus we reach here, consensus of two people, because we're the only people on the podcast, is that usually when somebody still wants to be part of the business, they are still in the video game industry, they tend to say good things, like, oh no,
Mhm.
yeah, no, EA doesn't not totally tell us what to do with our games, even though they the ones who cut the checks and pay all the money and can fire us at any time. And by the way, the current head of EA Motive just quit after so many years. But
Yeah.
it's that nah.
Yeah, no explanation given. She's the founder of EA Motive. I'm not sure. Well,
Yeah,
I don't know how that works, because you're like a branch of something.
but I think EA Motive was something else. I don't forget who they were, and then they got again bought out by EA. And by the way, it's the reminder of people who are watching the podcast early in the year. That's the studio that the
Andromeda Montreal.
yeah, basically,
Or
Montreal BioWare got folded into after half of their employees got fired. Yeah, that one, that one, that one, yeah, that one. Okay, so yeah, they paraded a couple of employees, and then the latest news. Let me see if I can quote it. Well, there's Kotaku article about this. But there was also another article saying, and I think it was in the I got in the note, we're saying no, we're changing the we're changing
our
the
overtime policy.
overtime policy. Like, wait, but I thought that you were not,
Yeah, it's like, I thought you said you didn't require people to work overtime.
and the people didn't actually work 100-hour weeks or 80-hour weeks or even
Or
60-hour
60.
weeks. But now you're changing it. And also sending a letter saying, thank you to all our employees for being such a great
Oh
place
yeah.
and working with
Thank-
us. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
thank you,
you.
thank you.
Thank you for helping us make
A lovely game.
a Red Dead Redemption 2. Here's a wall of names.
Yeah, which is typical. I mean, that happens in most companies. They do that both in game and that's not new. But the timing, it's
Yeah.
suspect. So on top of all that, we have this article. And brace yourselves, people who are not fans of Kotaku. But essentially talks about how, yeah. For example, let me quote something. They wanted to change a little, seemingly a little thing, but it isn't. They wanted to put black bars on all the cutscenes to make it look cinematic, right? To have sort of the drop screen, right? Here's a quote from someone. You can't just slap black bars on the cinematics we already shot, said one person who worked on the game. You have to reframe the camera so that the cinematics flow in a particular way, and you're emphasizing what you weren't emphasizing initially with that shot. And that seems to be a pattern that both Dan and Sam Hauser, they're like, oh, we got this new idea, change it, right?
Yep.
And that is a bit of a problem because, whatever schedule you had goes out the window. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
now we have to change
Essentially,
everything.
you have to go back and look at everything you've made up to that point and re-edit it, reshoot it, because that involves a lot of scripting of the camera and the movements. And you also have to now account for that you're going to sort of work with less area of the screen because you're not really making the screen all that much wider because you're still working with a regular screen. You're not, everybody's suddenly not, their TVs aren't going to change into a theater size dimensions. They're still going to be their regular 16 by 9.
And aspect ratios have to be maintained. On top of the fact that even cinematics that are in game, you still have that change between in game and out of game. That's why you have specific cinematics, and a lot of problems, especially with loading and crashes, happen in a lot of games, especially in multiplayer, massive games like this, on the cinematics, making a smooth transition back and forth between, because you have what's happening is that you have to work with dynamic loading, right? You have to make them seamless, but the cinematics and the actual gameplay, they operate in different memory sectors, right? It's like walking into a room, right? When you walk into a room, and if anybody's played with mods and stuff like that, it's like, oh, this is a different place. That's why when you fall through the world looks gray and everything else, because, say, a house is just one cell in memory. There's nothing else. There's no sun, there's no stars, there's no room outside. That's why you have to load in and to load out of the room. And what they do, like the Witcher games, like now they have dynamic loading, which hides the loading. So they sort of, and that's why you sometimes have, like, animate stuff that you don't see. That's why you tend to have pop in, right? And the same situation when you go to the cinematics. The character, well, it depends on how they do it, but also they limit or take away control from the player and then give them back again. So even if you're doing it in the same area, in the same cell, same map, you're now taking control, and now you have to script the animations for all the characters who do the things that you want them to do, and they're like, okay, back to you. So that's one of those areas of friction that can really wreck a game if you don't do it right. So it seems simple, but when you're talking about 500,000 actors and how many cinematics over 40, 50, 60 hours of gameplay, because these games are huge, right? They got them bigger every day, every generation. Is like, that's a little bit of a nightmare. And all of that, I think, ties into the subject of today, which we're going to basically wildly speculate about how to make better video games.
Yes, because for the record, neither one of us are game designers.
But we're going to talk about it as if we know what we're talking about. And if there's any game designers watching this, or in the VODs or on YouTube, whatever feel free to jump in, correct, expand, criticize. Although at least I'm going to cite one credible source on this. So we're going to talk about, this is something that's being, and I mentioned about it a lot on the podcast time and time again, is like, I get the feeling this sort of, nobody's been really able to say it. I've seen some people kind of repeat it of late, but for a while, I think about 2 years from now or so, maybe 3, when I started looking into hype and started looking into doing a little research on how much games really cost and how to make, the feeling that the way games are made is fundamentally broken. That we have to find a new way to make games. That we're operating under, to use a political term, old paradigms, right? Old ways of thinking that haven't really changed with the demands of gaming, and that we're imposing new business models on systems that are not made to handle them, sustain them. So there are two problems. Games have changed, they become more complex and more expensive and all that, so we have to change how to make them. And also these games as services and microtransactions, stuff like that, are adding things to games that individually might not seem a big problematic, but they add up to it, right? So let's start. You talk about pre-production. I think pre-production, and each company, that's another thing, it's like none of these things are standard. So it depends on the size of the studio and their parent companies, and depends on the project and the people involved. But I think pre-production has to be something that has to be bumped up a lot. Like, I think pre-production is from just getting ideas together. It has to be the thing. Like, if you're gonna make any game, you have to make the pre-production should be the thing that really sets the schedule for it, right? Things can change, and you should be able to change, but you should be able to lay the groundwork in pre-production. Like, this is the roadmap. This is what we expect to do. This is our main goal. These are our secondary goals. If you have an experienced studios with experienced people involved, this is when people are going to come in. You know, your writers are going to come in, and they're going to be doing this for X amount of time. Then there are voice actors, and this is when, you know, and make the pre-production be the roadmap to it. And also the pre-production has to have, from the get-go, and it's something I think a lot of studios don't want to do because they don't want to, you know, it's a sunk cost fallacy, have the kill switch. Like, literally have someone in the studio. Don't wait for especially if you have publishers looking over your shoulders, don't wait for the publisher to kill the game for you. Be ready with that kill switch. Because the longer you spend time doing work, the more resources you sink into it, the worse it gets if you have to either kill the game or just throw it out there, you know, unfinished.
Yeah. So I think another thing too is like the whole talk about crunch is it's really managing setting like a realistic timeline, and and on top of that realistic timeline, also giving yourself a big buffer of time when you're expecting a release date. Yeah. And make it pretty variable too.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the first outside factors, especially when we talk about AAA games, is, and I said this before, is that AAA companies, the publishers, have become slaves to their own marketing cycle, right? Which is tied into also to their the how can I say this? I forgot the term of it. The quarterly reports and the yearly reports, right, and all of that. So they have to keep their investors happy, and pay taxes and all this, or avoid tax in the case of Activision and other companies. They have to do these things. So they're slaves to the advertising cycle because they're also slaves to the fiscal year, right? So they have to meet certain growth targets, not simply profit targets. I think people think, oh, it's profit. No, they have to show constant and ever expanding growth, which is what driving a lot of this stuff is. And we talked about hype cycle, and it's like one of the things that affects the overall cost of a project is not the project itself, it's all the money that goes into hyping this project. Like E3 is huge. What was the last time? I think Nintendo, when they got into trouble, they started pulling back from E3, but they went back again to E3 once the Switch hit it big, right? But when's the last time that
they don't actually go to E3 though? I think they just happen to kind of release their information around E3 where everyone else. So I think E3 is still important to them in the sense that that's when they kind of make their announcements on their own Nintendo Direct streaming thing, but I don't think they have an actual presence at E3.
Yeah, which is smart because it means that they're saving a lot of money. And you can see that Nintendo was smart about it. It's like, okay, E3 is too expensive. And one of the things Nintendo has done, especially with the Switch, it started with the Wii U, is taking control of that advertising cycle, right? We announce when we want to announce, right? And that, I think, is very important because, and we talked about, it takes about between 14 months to 18 months of hype before a game comes out.
Yeah.
And that's expensive. That's constant news and leaks and videos and behind the scenes shots and featurettes and interviews and social media presence, and also paying big advertising, companies, whether you're doing it in-house or not. And I think we've seen some games where the advertising budget can double and even triple the overall budget, which means you haven't really changed how much this particular game costs to make, that you're still stuck at, say, 50 million or 60 or 70 million, but you end up with a game costing 140 million because you spend twice as much money, on advertising to get people to pre-order than not. And on pre-ordering, focusing on this of pre-ordering means that canceling a game becomes very difficult. Look, I think Ubisoft canceled a pre-order game on Nintendo Switch, and they basically kept it on the down low. They was like, oh, it's gone. We're not gonna sell it.
Yeah. I believe it was some sort of like a snowboarding game or something.
Yeah, it was a snowboarding game. It was a game that it was going to be released on the Switch. It was like, oh yeah, we're not, it just disappeared from the store, and it was like, what is it? It's like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna have to give people money back because right. That pre-order culture already creates a lot of pressure, because if 1 million people or 2 million or 5 million people pre-order your game, you got to deliver something, right? On one hand, you have the people who want the game. On the other hand, you have the investors who want to, who are willing to, cut ties and run the moment they don't see the next, expansion wave, the next growth wave. It's like you already trapped yourself in a very, in a place where you have to spend an inordinate amount of money in order to make that work. And if you don't, then it becomes a big loss. Every game, as we talked about this before, becomes that much more that much more risky
of a big gamble. I think, but I still think back to the the first Tomb Raider game reboot, where it's like, oh yeah, it sold thousands, or it sold millions of copies, but like more copies than most games can't even come close to, and it was still considered a financial failure because they've sunk so much money into it that it's almost like every person on earth has to buy a copy for it to be successful. I believe Resident Evil 6 also had the same issue, where they just sunk so much money into it that there's no way that the market, if everybody in the entire market could bought a copy of this game, that's the only way it would make its money back.
Yeah, and then moving into production, and this is why I think pre-production is also very important. I'm going to quote from a GameIndustry.biz article, and in fact, the headline of the article is from EA's Criterion, which is one of the UK's supposedly is to talk about one of the UK's best places to work and how it avoids crunching. The title goes something like this. The headline: "Don't give in to fear and keep adding more features. How not to overwork your employees." We talked about how, changing stuff in the game midway. That's what's called bloat. And it happens to almost every project. And that's why having a kill switch is also very important. You got to stick to your guns. And this is also feeds the hype as well, because you want to promise a lot of stuff, right? But you can't really promise too much because it becomes false advertising, right? So the pressure is there to constantly make the game seem better. This game has, shrinking horse testicles. Yes. Because of course it does, right? It's like nobody asked for that.
Yeah, how does that make the game better? How does that make the gameplay better? It might make, it's just such a tiny, like, insignificant immersion feature. Because realistically, unless you're riding a horse behind another person who's also riding a horse, and that horse just happens to be a male, that's probably not, in the middle of winter, that's probably not something you're going to notice.
Yeah, unless you're always a camera.
In real life, yeah. Yes, unless your eyesight for some reason is behind you at all times.
Yeah. So but I think it's, again, that's one of the things that it's about hype. It's about hype. Like, look at how much detail we include in our game. This is the love of the game. We went and we had at least one person, or maybe a team of 4 or 5 people on our 200, 300 employee team. Think about the testicles. We did not miss. It's like, yeah, that's bloat. That's, nobody cares. If somebody cared, they probably would mod the game alongside probably sex scenes with horses. But that's not something.
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah, it's out there for Skyrim.
I mean,
again,
let's talk about the first paragraph. I want to quote it. It's this week's Map Webster VP and GM of Criterion. I mean, this is EA, but I think it's Bears. Developers love to final. This is a period when we go the fastest, we build fast, we play, and we change fast. We communicate and we make decisions. We come together and we prioritize. There's no reason for these actions, behaviors to have to wait until the end of the process. Make it happen way earlier in your timeline, pre-production or early production, right? Nail down the things that you want to do, right? And by the way, this happens to all kinds of studios. We're talking about our AAA studios, but it happens a lot, especially to there's a video that was circulating 4 or 5 years ago about somebody who had been working on a very simple game, and they never finished it because they kept adding features to it. Oh, I learned to do this, so I added a feature. So the game became this sort of sprawling mess. Now, I can't talk on video game design, but I'm working on my own tabletop RPG. 2980, and it's gone for a very long process. I've been changing stuff. I mean, one day I'll probably sit down and write all the crazy ideas and where this thing came from. But there was one point when I said, you know what, I got to keep things simple. I can add more features and house rules and hacks and stuff like that, but I got to keep it simple because then I'm never going to finish it. So I said I'm going to use the rule of 3, right? Which didn't quite work out, but it's a sort of good rule in the back of your head to use, like to pull out, like it's this tool. It's like any one feature, any one rule should be under 3 steps, maximum 3, or at best a multiple of 3, up to 9, right? And the reason for that is like, well, that seems very arbitrary, and it is. It's purely arbitrary, but it's one of those controls that you set up for yourself that gets you thinking about, hey, listen, let's handle it. I think one of the problems is that, again, we talked about the garage coder, the bedroom programmer, the small company, especially the culture of the 1990s, not even the 80s, the 90s, where small studios all of a sudden became huge with games like Doom and stuff like that. And there's a culture there, especially when now the people have stayed around long term, the bosses, especially we also talk about the auteurs, being the more, the people are well known in the industry, and they made a record for themselves being teenagers and young adults in Silicon Valley, in LA, working very long hours and coming up with these miracles of games, and nobody thought they were great and that they were going to make millions, whatever, and became names in the industry. And that is the attitude that sort of carried over. Even though the way video games, especially in AAA space or even AA space, is more office-like, right? You have bigger groups. It's not you and 5 people in a room somewhere, right? You know, it's not rushing to get the bouncing ball demo out of the Amiga out of CES 1984, 85, right? It's, this is a 3-year project, a 5-year project. Andromeda turned out to be 5 years, and 2 of those years got scrapped. And you have cubicles, and you have a group of people and divisions. In many ways, you got to think more like an office, right? This is a long-term project, and you got to keep your ideas. In fact, I would say alongside the kill switch, which kill switch would be the. In fact, I would have somebody who had essentially a virtual kill switch on one hand and scissors on the other, right?
Yes.
Always looking to what things they can cut. Have a early period where you just experiment and then start cutting. In fact, and this is probably something that would go to the AAA studios, although everybody is moving also to, one of the reasons why this is also a problem, especially now, is because every AAA game studio like Bethesda, like EA, they're looking to move into the games as service. The big game, the new, it's just a wave of new MMOs. And like MMOs before them, they're big, complicated games that have to be built from the ground up to work, but also have to have ever-growing services and features, and they have to hopefully last for years and have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of players, right? And again, the more you spend on them, the more risky they become, the more likely they might fail and be a huge failure, more money spent. I mean, Destiny and Destiny 2, I gotta believe that the budget for original Destiny also covered Destiny 2. It was $500 million, right? And they were projecting for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think you have to go back and go like, no, we have to be able to make sure that the things that we want, uh, we maintain the core. We have these things. These are the things we want. Make sure those things work, and then add stuff later. Maybe discover it along the way, stuff like that. But one of the things I think that double A studios and even indies or indies that are moving into double A space might be what I would call a two-tier system. I mean, in Hollywood, and I hate to make comparisons, but a lot of the movies in Hollywood made are not summer blockbusters. The bulk of them are just much smaller, cheaper movies, not quite indie movies, but smaller in scale. And usually, many of those movies, in the long run, it's weird because in the short run is the big movies that finance the smaller movies.
Yeah.
But in the long run is sometimes the smaller movies that keep the audiences going in October and November and December, off season, that keep the studios going. So maybe we should have stuff like what I call the indie bullpen kind of thing, where you create smaller, more focused games. Like, you're moving into making a shooter. Well, make a small Doom-like shooter first. Make sure your studio has the expertise in that. Make it so that it's simple, straightforward, and somewhat profitable, right? And then now that you know how those things work, you can move them into your big game. Right? If you have to do a lot of experimenting, might as well just make a side game, or cut it off. Say, okay, we wanted to put this feature. We can work on this feature. Okay, you, Tim, Jonah, Jennifer, Malik, make a game out of this. Go, small team. Go do your own thing. I mean, Hearthstone was made by a very small team as a side off to World of Warcraft and the franchise, right? And they made it work. Now it's a huge game, right? Profits and all that. Sometimes the small ideas shouldn't be hitting the disc. If you try to keep them, they're gonna roll over and do that. And finally, I think, again, going back to the advertising cycle, again, AAA studios obviously don't work this way, but I think that applying the 90-day rule, or 120 days or 30 days, however many days you want to do it, is like, you don't talk about the game until you really know that you're going to launch it, right? You have something there.
And I will give credit, but that's the credit for some of this. It seems like they've been doing that a lot lately in terms of their marketing. Like Fallout 76 wasn't really announced till this summer. Before then, I think the only time it was ever really mentioned were through leaks and stuff, and a lot of people did not believe that there was going to be a Fallout multiplayer game coming on. But I believe they also did that for Fallout 4, which they also kind of just 6 months before, bam, just out of nowhere, there it is.
I mean, and I'm not, the things that I'm pulling this stuff out of my butt, but again, I'm quoting from this article. One of the things says, don't be afraid to cut lower priority features of context. The earlier, the better. Never underestimate the velocity of a well-tested, happy person. Regularly get candid feedback from your team and measuring their health. And this is, again, one of the problems in the AAA space is that the people who are the owners of publishers, they rarely are people who know about video game design. And again, the people who have stayed in the business for long, especially those big names, they come from a culture of crunching, of putting along hours, and it worked for them. So why doesn't it work now? Why are these little whiners who are having these, great jobs, these dream jobs, complaining about their dream jobs? Like, well, if you have to work 60, 80, 70, 80 hours, you lose your family, you lose a chance to have a private life or a personal life, then your dream job became a nightmare.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like, how many of these people running these companies are actually play the games that are made, or even like interact with their market? Like most of these CEOs, I'm sure, don't ever play their video games that their studios create. They only interact with their shareholders, but never hang among their audience.
Yeah, I mean, except for E3, and usually it's just other reporters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, one example I think is very simple. Live the behaviors you want to see. If you believe everyone should live at 6 o'clock, then live at 6, right? The boss should leave. Actually, it have to be like 5 o'clock, 8 to 4, 9 to 5. But let's say 6 o'clock is, so an extra hour, right? Uh, don't place higher worth on talent over values. Uh, time does not equal passion, right? It basically talks about not burning people out.
Working together to agree on the rules.
Yeah,
Not celebrate or reward bad behaviors in any way.
Make decisions early. Make them. An incorrect decision made is a lot better than not making any decision at all. It makes to move you forward quickly. In other words, starting early, setting your bases, and sticking to your plan is very good. One, I think what's very interesting, software is the truth. At the most basic level, if you don't have any other tools to measure the quality of what you're doing, then at least have the software. If you can play the game on a regular cadence, then you're able to review and gauge the quality of your software. This helps to reduce that fear. And I think another aspect is like, again, bloat and ambition. Going back to Andromeda, this idea of, hey, we need to make everything procedurally generated.
Mm-hmm.
And when that fell apart, they didn't have anything.
Yeah, they didn't have anything to fall back on because they didn't really have a vision, like an original vision, other than make a new Mass Effect game. Actually, another game that had this issue was the remake of System Shock.
Mm-hmm.
They had this original vision of trying to stay true to the original. They got kickstarted so hard that, like, way past their original goal, that they started adding and losing sight of their original vision. They started just adding these new features. They started making a lot of visual changes that ultimately it started looking so generic. It started looking more like Prey than the original System Shock.
I mean, and again, I'm not pulling all this stuff out of my butt. I, for example, had we talked about that, about bloat, and especially when it comes to crowdsourcing. I talked about to one of the designers of Shadowrun a long time ago. I'm gonna cue Kevin Maloney, one of the designers of Shadowrun. He was in it, and one of the questions I asked is, how do you deal with that? And he said, essentially, you got to have realistic goals, and you can't just simply keep adding more and more goals just because. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you're gonna fail. So I'm gonna put the link to it. So I talked to a couple of designers over the years, right? Wish I had more of them. This is the link to the interview on YouTube, and also I think I try to put it on the channel sometimes, but I'll try to get into VOD as well here on Twitch. And yeah, the video game industry has always been risky, and I think that puts a lot of fear in people's minds, right? And job security is a big deal. So I mean, if my boss stays over 2, 3, 4 hours, and everybody stays over, and there's a weekend and another weekend and stuff like that, I would either go out looking for a new job or stuff like that. And I think one final thing I can say is, and this goes back to Andromeda, it happens in other places as well, is that when you're looking for feedback on your game, and what people, especially if you already have established franchise, look beyond your forums and your own close circle of fans and friends. They're a good start, but you have to look beyond that. Especially if you're looking for a game as service and you want to appeal to a much larger audience as possible, right? Have a variety of voices, hear a lot of people out. And again, going back to the kill switch, if you have an idea for a cool game and you're like, yeah, but we don't have the resources because we don't have the software for it. We don't have the resources because nobody knows how to make this, right? Not every game. We hear a lot about stories about games reinventing engines and changing things and stuff like that. EA, I'm looking at you, trying to have every game that is made under the sun under the same engine. That doesn't work, right? They made miracles about with that engine, but there's only, and also that's what happened to Telltale as well. They had an engine, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and have realistic goals and have just, if you have a good idea but you can't really plan it out, then put it in the back burner. Go with something else. You know, better to have a good game. And I think finally, do not, as much as possible, do not rely on the patching culture, because it doesn't save you from crunch. People say, oh, patching is good because they miss things and stuff like that. It's like, ironically, I think that the patching culture, that patching things after, so many times, is because of the crunch. Because people
like, are, oh, no, I forgot that. I wrote it down on a sticky somewhere.
People are so exhausted, especially QA, who, and I think one of the things has to be reevaluated, how people treat QA, right? The people who do quality assurance, because usually quality assurance is one of the entry points to a lot of people into the video game industry, but they get burned out so quickly that they never actually get in. They do the QA for one project. It's like, I just got abused, I don't want to deal with this anymore, screw video games, I'm out. And you're burning people out even before they truly enter the industry, and that is not a good idea. So, any final thoughts?
Just don't forget to treat your employees really well, because you got to remember, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are making you money.
Yeah, that's also final note, is that talent is not necessarily interchangeable, one-to-one, at least, right? You just can't toss one person and expect someone else to come in and do the same job or anything like it. So that's a discussion on how to make better video games. I hope that is helpful to anyone. As always, Chapelmon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Chopamon pretty much everywhere. I am Chopamon_Aragon on Twitter and on Twitch. You can find me on YouTube at Chopamon. This week I released the sixth and final part of my review on Mass Effect 3 Citadel.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally just wrapped that series up after over 4 years I've been working on that.
Yeah, and you can find, I believe it. Let me just get you the link to that. Chapelmon Aragon. Yeah, it's.
Oh, did you actually see that? Thank you.
Yeah.
You should watch the entire series. It's long. It's been many years, so the quality kind of varies between.
Yeah, different.
Yeah, there was a major hardware switch between then. You could kind of tell, because the first few episodes are kind of choppy from being used on a older computer.
Yeah. That's. I'm trying to make sure that. Oh, now YouTube is not showing it. Thanks. But it's on YouTube on the Chapelmon Aragon. And you can find me here, of course, on Lessons Learned 1 channel. If you want to support the channel, there are many, many ways to do so. You can follow, subs are always welcome. You can share, you can join the Discord, which you can find down below, or we can always put the Discord up in the chat as always. And subscribe and do all the things that help follow the channel. We also going to be continuing with our Pathfinder Kingmaker playthrough during the entire week. We're looking to do a major shake-up, introduce new things, so we're going to do that. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Anna, who is also Anna the Unknown, who does the lovely art for our channel, and everywhere else, thank you for coming. And as always, we'll see you when we see you. Have a good day.
Good night, everybody.
And